Accessing a press box is vital to the coverage of football matches for any sports journalist. But for me, and so many others with a disability, simply getting to the press box often represents a huge challenge. I'm Beau Brown, and this is the story of the barriers, troubles and difficulties that disabled journalists face simply trying to do their job. This is Access Denied. In a sport that talks constantly about inclusion, the responsibility to ensure disabled journalists are not excluded from coverage does not rest with the individuals alone. It also rests with the institutions that represent them. Paul McCarthy is the head of the Football Writers Association, an organisation which represents hundreds of football journalists across the country.
Yeah, I think what there is an absolute awareness now by clubs who are developing new grounds and moving to new grounds. The likes of Tottenham, Brentford, Everton now with the new stadium. Certainly Wembley, when it opened, there was a huge thought put into the design to make it accessible for everybody in terms of the media. They are obviously limited by the age of the stadia. So many of them, a lot of them are, in the early part of the 20th century, so there was no thought to accessibility. And I have to say, even able-bodied reporters sometimes find a lot of the press boxes quite difficult, lots of stairs, and very cramped conditions.
In terms of the difference between, obviously, the funding in the Premier League is extortionate compared to the rest of the pyramid. Is there a difference in terms of, in your experience, what the clubs can offer disabled journalists from a press box point of view?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes is the answer. I'd love to see a sort of utopia where everybody had instant access to everything. We fight at the FWA for media access, for more access to players, to managers, to coaches on a match day. But yes, I think further down the pyramid you go, where there's less money, where there's less media, so they don't always have the capability to cater for the disabled. So I think what you find is there's a growing recognition across certainly in the Premier League, but across the EFL. But the bottom line is, if you're going further down the pyramid, unfortunately, the funding just isn't there. And while the will is there from press officers and from clubs as a whole, sometimes it just becomes very, very difficult. The mindset is changing, and I'm glad to say it has changed, but just the ability to get people in whatever guise is restrictive.
While improvements are being made, disabled journalists still face challenges day to day. BBC Radio 5 Live's Andy Stevenson shared his experience.
There were a couple of grounds I went to where it was just a complete nightmare. It was just a disaster. So I got to what would have been, I think, a League Two club. I'd arrived a little bit late because of traffic, and the press box wasn't really a press box at all. There weren't even any desks. It was just, 20 to 30 seats allocated to the press. So it's like, right, there you are, your seat number, 24 or whatever. And for me, one of the most important things, there's two huge things for me, accessibility-wise. The amount of stairs is a consideration, but really it's kind of leg room. There's three considerations. Leg room. Do I have the space to get in and out of my seat? I.e., when everybody's in position, can I still get out? If obviously at the dramatic end of the scale, if there was a fire, but also at the less dramatic but much more realistic end of the scale, if I need the loo, want to go and have a cup of tea, forget something in the car, can I get out and get back to my seat? Because I can't clamber over. You see it all the time, don't you?
Of course,
fans and press, they will clamber over the seats. I just can't do that. I just couldn't do it. And third thing is, I need some sort of desk, because I need everything in front of me so that I can reach everything, and I write with my arm like this, if you can see on the camera, and blah, blah, blah. So I turn up at this club, seat number 24. Because I was late, everybody was already in position. And as you know, all the radio people will have their headsets on, plugged into their ISDN units or whatever.
Yeah.
And my seat was sort of at the opposite end of the row, but there was no way for me to get past the people who were already in position. And those people were already on air at this point. So
Right.
still to this day, I don't know quite how I managed to negotiate it, but I managed to explain the situation to the two local radio stations in my way, and they both went to a song on air to enable them to sort of stop broadcasting for 2 minutes to allow me to
Yeah.
get past to my, and then I had to turn around and ask one of them. Fortunately, I think one of the local radio stations had an engineer with them who was still working. It's not like he was there on a jolly. He was working for them. But I had to ask him, oh, by the way, sorry, can I just, having now got you to unplug all of your stuff and get me in, could you now just plug my kit in and all that? And then on top of that, there were no desks whatsoever. So I actually had to have my ISDN box balanced on the seat next to me, you know, like the fold down seat. So the weight of the ISDN box was holding the seat down.
Yeah.
I had nowhere to put my notes or anything. And I just thought, this is utterly ridiculous, because like the environment was obviously not accessible, but had I had somebody with me, my own designated, you know, assistant or helper, a lot of those problems would have been overcome. You know, they could have held the ISDN box on their lap and made it secure. They could have held a notepad up for me to write. They could have taken my notes for me, really. What I would say very strongly is grounds that can be modernised, of which there are plenty, and certainly grounds that are being built brand new, or grounds where new stands are being created, should absolutely have this in mind. I guess the ultimate truth is they are not expecting disabled people to be in those press boxes. You know, there is not an expectation that somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with a prosthetic leg or somebody who's blind is going to be a football reporter.
But not every stadium gets it wrong. At Brentford, accessibility was designed in from the very beginning. The G-Tech Community Stadium is one of the few football grounds in the country where disabled journalists can access press facilities without special arrangements, workarounds, or apologies. Amelia Archer is a media executive.
So, what accessibility provisions are in place for disabled journalists that come to Brentford?
They have access to everywhere that the press do. So the press box, the media room, the press conference room, the tunnel area, all the photographer zones and pitch side is all accessible for people with additional accessibility requirements. And anywhere that they need to be, they can access it within this whole stadium.
And the G-Tech obviously is accessible. Is that because it's one of the newest stadiums in the league?
I'd like to think that that's definitely a case of yes, I'd like to say so. I think that the G-Tech is only 4 years old, and that when these newer stadiums that are coming up from kind of nothing have got the kind of insight to kind of think of all these things.
I mean, the process by which, you know, there's obviously been a lot of thought for not only disabled journalists but also disabled fans, disabled families. It is quite startling. However, it's not always the case. In your experience, when you go to away press boxes, not that I suppose you haven't really thought about it, but generally speaking, what's accessibility like in the Premier League?
I think it's one of those things that it really varies. I think there are definitely stadiums that are newer that have been able to kind of be built with accessible needs and places in mind for that. I think a lot of the newer stadiums, I think hopefully have had that ability to kind of create something from the ground up and have incorporated these sort of important things. I think that press boxes can be very difficult. I think especially in older stadiums, I can imagine, and it's one of those things that I was talking to you about earlier, I do think it's made me realise that I need to think about it more as well, like how, you know, sort of it's a privilege to just be able to, you know, walk up the stairs and go into the press box.
I suppose finally, I've spoken about the family feel and the feel of togetherness at the club in the stadium here today. Is accessibility, obviously it's, you know, I've seen it from a journalistic point of view, but accessibility, generally speaking, there's improvement being made, but I think, you know, there's still room for improvement per se. Is it one of the club's priorities?
Absolutely. We have an entire team dedicated to supporting our fans with disabilities. So on match days, fans who can request additional support, they can request additional areas, specific seats. So we have a team on site every single match day who assist with all of these. That goes for away fans as well as home fans, because we want everyone to have as much of a good experience at the GTEC as possible.
Yeah.
So there is disabled access and seating all around the area, in the away end, in the home end. And what this also entails is that if they need an extra help, we have a team on site who will also be able to support them, show them where they need to be. And that's just one of those ways that I think that the GTEC Stadium has just kind of made itself as accessible to everyone as possible. And the club really try and show that access on so many levels. It's not even just for people in wheelchairs, it's for families with young children, it's for elderly people who may have mobility issues. It's a lot. Like, there's been a real thought process into the access for everyone, from the financial side of things to the access side of things to just how the day out at the stadium for a home match is for everyone, and to make it as an enjoyable experience for as many people as possible. There's 17,000 seats in the stadium, and I think always the plan is to have 17,000 really happy people.
So there you have it. One fully accessible stadium, 17,000 very happy people, and one even happier Beau Brown.